Hi, Elliot. Can you hear me now?
I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, phew, yes. Rob's having a few connection issues. We've had a few. I think there's actually maybe two people also who've joined the session, and I
Yeah.
can't see who they might be, but just waiting for Rob to connect, and hopefully the connection works out for us.
Jane, you know the sign that I've got behind me here? This is the room that I was in. Are we on is it just me and you talking, or is this?
No, there's actually, I think there's actually a few other people. There might be four people in the session. I'm not sure.
Great. Well, pleasure to be here. I'm happy to have arrived.
Yes,
After all
likewise.
the technological headaches of today, I'm in. I'm here.
Fiji, where happiness finds you.
That's the one. So we're waiting for Rob to join us from Fiji. Is that correct?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Beautiful.
Hopefully shortly.
Yeah, he's in Suva. Spectacular. So, would you like me to chat for a little bit, perhaps, about?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah. So, for anyone who is listening, I'm Jane West from Tourism Fiji, and I'm based in the UK. Looking forward to getting back to Fiji sometime soon, and I have great pleasure also being joined by Elliot Stubbs, who visited the UK and then got stuck here due to COVID. Otherwise, over to you, Elliot, to explain what do you do in Fiji?
What's been going on? Yeah, sure. So I'm just going to speak freely because today's been a really interesting day. So 6 months ago, I was in Fiji, living there, working there, going to school there, not quite, but my daughter does. I've lived and worked in the Asauas and the Mamanuthas, all around Fiji, really. Probably dived about 30 or 40 islands there. Love the place. Now, specifically with regards to Barefoot Manta and the whole Manta area up in the Asauas, I know that channel really well. There's a channel there. It's about probably 6 or 8 meters deep. And there's just a lot of manta rays that come through there at certain times of the year. I think from memory, it's between May and September. Is that right, Jane?
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, they've had a circus this summer with no one being there.
Well, from what Rob's been saying, he's been having a great time because it means he can just, do what he loves to do, which is look at manta rays and photograph them and tag and enjoy the creatures in their environment without too many people around. But that's not a good thing for tourism, obviously, but Rob's having a good time.
No, well, it makes, I suppose it's a much better environment for the manta rays at the moment, not so good for tourism. But the people in the Asawa Islands are really resourceful. And I think it'll be really interesting to hear from Rob if he can connect and find out, just how they're surviving without tourists there and, the kind of tricks they've been getting up to survive. But the Asawa Islands are quite easy to get to. So you arrive into Nandi on the largest island, which is Viti Levu, and it's actually a really short journey to the marina. And from the marina, there is a daily catamaran that runs all the way up to the Sawa Islands. It takes about 5 hours, actually. But you can, if you wanted to be less eco-friendly but more extravagant, then you could travel on a seaplane or a helicopter. But the Yasawa Flyer, which is part of the South Sea Cruise Awesome Adventures group, does some really great flexible passes. And for a very small amount of money, you can do island hopping. And I was very, very fortunate on my last trip to Fiji to be invited up to Barefoot Manta, and had the huge honor of actually being able to go out and sight a manta. Her name is Lady Grey, but there are many others that come and go. And I think Rob's just texted me to say that he might actually be in sessions now, but I'm not seeing him yet. So thanks for your patience for anyone who's still waiting. But just to suffice to say that Barefoot Manta is an affordable property. You can stay in what we call bures, which is the Fijian word for a dwelling or a room, and most of them are actually on the beach, and it just has the most incredible aspect, because you've got beaches on different sides of the island. So, you can be on the beach for sunset and sunrise, and they do an incredible hike right up to, right on the hill, right above the resort at 5 a.m. And it honestly offers some of the best sunsets I've ever seen in Fiji. But it's all home cooking. It feels really family run in a nice way, and you're just there to really enjoy the marine area. And you've got spectacular snorkeling just right off the beach. You can almost see from the beach, so you don't have to go in far to really enjoy that, and therefore it makes for a great location for people who are maybe traveling with great divers but don't dive themselves. So if you're a mixed family or you have a partner that doesn't dive, then it's a good choice. So, it's Rob's role there is marine biologist. He's been there for a while, and I know that if he can actually link up with us, he will have some really nice updates for us.
He's trying.
I know he's trying. So welcome to Fiji. It's first thing in the morning. I guess the internet is, they've probably been watching the match, Exeter versus Wasp, because, rugby in Fiji is more or less a religion. And, so, if he won't be too excited by the result if he was supporting, Wasps. I don't know who won. The TV went down here as well, just in the last 5 minutes.
Well, I've just had a message from Rob. He is saying, "Oh dear, I am getting serious techno rage."
Oh gosh. Okay. So, is it the internet, I wonder, or just on because he did say he got into the site okay?
I'm not sure. He may be having a slow. Unfortunately, having lived and worked in Fiji on a number of occasions over a 15 or 18-year time frame now, I suppose. It's getting better. The internet in Fiji is slowly getting better in certain areas. The main Nadi International Airport has a lot better internet now than it did have in years gone by. Suva, the capital city, has decent internet in areas, but there are various areas around the Fiji Islands which unsurprisingly don't have the best or the fastest internet in the world. And I think Rob might be in one of those areas at the moment. Unfortunately. Shame.
Depends on the weather, but let's hope he can get in soon. Okay. But in the meantime, Fiji is really getting ready to welcome visitors back. Currently, the borders are closed. They've done really well to contain COVID. So they've had very, very few cases, and they're holding out to be part of the Pacific bubble with New Zealand and Australia, and those borders and travel can resume from those two destinations. And it's likely some of the Pacific Islands will then join that group. And so it's, we are actually taking bookings for Fiji at the moment, but you can't really travel. And I think we're hoping that from Easter through to summer next year, that we may well be in a position to head for Fiji. But the good thing is that, for most people traveling to Fiji from the UK, they might book 6 to 9 months to 12 months in advance. It's quite a long-term proposition. And many divers coming from the UK would probably spend about 15 days there. The average length of stay for other people visiting from the UK is between 5 and 11 nights, because most people don't realise that Fiji isn't just one island. It's 333 islands, and actually it's almost faster to fly to Auckland, 3 hours away, than it is to fly to some more remote areas of Fiji. So the great thing about Fiji is choice. You've got fantastic choice of accommodation. So very basic, living in a village, staying somewhere like Barefoot Manta that's really affordable, but offers the most outstanding experiences. But then at the same time, hey, Rob, welcome, Bulla from Fiji. Oh, don't worry. Well, it's just great to be connected. And thanks so much for joining us.
Stumble, you might fall. Stumble, you might fall. I couldn't resist.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much, Rob. We have got a few visitors, I think, who are listening in. I can't completely see who they are at this point on the panel, but yeah, just great to have you join us. Are you still there? No.
Nope.
Okay, I'll carry on. So Fiji's a really great destination. You know, as a stopover with Australia and New Zealand, you know, you've obviously got the geography in your favour. It's very close by, but it's also really good to combine Fiji with some of the other Pacific islands. So if you're really into wreck diving, you know, Fiji has a few wrecks, but it's not known for the wreck diving. So you might want to maybe combine it with Vanuatu, or go and see other whales in Tonga. So, but you know, Fiji just has the most incredible diversity, and I can actually see Rob now. Welcome, Rob. How are you? Bula. Thanks for
I'm
joining us.
good. I'm good.
Who won the
Bula
match?
Vinaka.
I missed the last 5 minutes. Who won the match?
I'm not sure actually. I abandoned it 20 minutes ago.
Oh.
I abandoned it 20 minutes ago to try and get logged into this.
Anyway, great.
It was a tight arm wrestle. It wasn't a proper exhibition of free flowing rugby shots.
Oh, I know. Anyway,
yeah, good to find you.
Yeah, well,
here.
thanks.
What have you guys been?
All right. So
about?
we've just been talking about how easy it is to get to Fiji. That the borders aren't currently open. We're hoping that they will open at some point, you know, between Easter and summer next year for the Northern Hemisphere. Hopefully before then for people coming in from Australia and New Zealand. We just don't know. But Fiji has launched a care commitment program, and so resorts are really well and truly getting ready. There is so much space in Fiji. And you know, I think post COVID travel, it's going to be such a wonderful destination to go to. You know, the people in Fiji are the most famous thing about it. You know, the manta rays as well, but the people in Fiji are just known to be the warmest and most hospitable and happiest people on the planet. We're biased, but you know, you really got to come down and experience it for yourself. Most people who come to Fiji feel that it's a transformational experience, and I think, you know, after all we've been through this year, I can't think of anywhere better I want to be at that time. But you know, Rob, we're just really keen to hear how you've been coping during this COVID time, and how things are at Barefoot Manta, and what you've been up to.
So yeah, it was a pretty dramatic transformation, as I'm sure it was for pretty much every single person on the planet. And I guess over the first few weeks, it took a little bit of getting used to. We basically closed down the island. We had you know, only sort of 10 local staff, and there was about 4 or 5 expats up with us on Barefoot Manta. A lot of the others, I think, were doing very much the same thing. And at first there was a sort of obviously an ambiguity, and everyone's a bit uncertain about where everything was going. And then when it all kind of set in, myself and there was another marine biologist, Matt, who's actually returned home to Belgium now, basically sort of said to each other, we have this awesome opportunity to continue to go out and monitor the manta rays. I'm not sure how much you guys have discussed about the manta setup up at
not much yet.
That's what you're here for.
You know, it's just literally okay, fantastic. Well, I mean, I'm sure I can go into that in more detail in a bit, but you know, it's a daily sort of activity. We'd go out around high tide, and any mantas that are there, we try and record. We get ID shots on their underside, and we record the conditions and everything like that, which is what we would be doing if tourism's going on. So we thought, you know, this is a fantastic chance to see them without the tourists. And you know, if we went home, then who knows what's going to go on. You know, this year of amazing data kind of goes without being recorded, without being witnessed. And the other thing is that the reef at Barefoot Manta, at least, is very accessible. And you know, whether we're going out scuba or snorkeling, we have this fringing sort of just a shallow drop off to about 4 meters, and it slopes down sandy reef. And we've been doing lots of coral projects there for a long time. The marine biologists before me were there for 5 years. Before them, there was an Australian lady as well, and she was there for 2 years. And so we've had lots of coral kind of work done. And now I mean, I'm not going to say without the tourists there to distract us. Obviously, we love the tourists there, and it kind of gives us all, that's the lifeblood for everything that happens in the Asawas. But basically, we had sort of almost nothing else to fill our time, so we threw ourselves really heavily into the coral work. You know, the clams project we've got as well, and then, you know, also, you know, as I mentioned, the mantas. So each day there was plenty to do, and the manta season is starting to sort of drop off at the moment. I'm actually on the mainland right now, and there's a few Fijian guys on the island, but one guy in particular who's doing the monitoring, and it's unfortunate there aren't that many around right now. The reason I'm on the mainland is that I attended a climate forum, the Pacific Climate Forum, and basically it's a La Nina year right now, which kind of is a very sort of it's a short term for a very complicated climatic fluctuation, but in short it means there's a kind of very cold current of water shooting across the Pacific around the equator, and that kind of causes a spread of warm water around Fiji or around the sort of western southern Pacific and sort of north as well. And then that can cause a lot of things, and it's probably going to cause a lot of rain and be a bit of a warm sort of summer for us. And across the Fiji region, it's actually probably slightly reduced chance of cyclones, which is, you know, I think positive across the whole country. So obviously that's a broad generalization of how things are going to be. But in short, that probably explains why the manta season at the moment seems to have died off. The mantas that come to that channel just north of our island, they very much, their movements seem to be very closely associated with the plankton, the tiny little crustaceans, which we call copepods, which are mass when the conditions are just perfect. And actually, that's one of the beautiful things about that channel is the sort of almost the architecture of the islands. If you were going to design a funnel to catch currents that come from the southeast, which is sort of what happens most of the year between, you know, April and October, all that water gets pushed across by the winds. All that water has lovely nutrients that gets caught in this sort of, the way the islands are set up, and it gets pushed into this tiny little channel. And then boom, you know, throughout June, especially June, I mean, we get it through May, June, July, massive aggregations of these little copepods, and then the mantas come and have a great time. The highest number of individuals ever recorded since we've been monitoring mantas over the last few years was this year in July, and it was 15 individuals. And, you know, you're seeing combinations of so many different types of behaviors. They were there for hours. There was about 6 of us in the water with it. And somersault feeding, you've got chain feeding where, you know, they sort of maybe 3 or 4 of them line up. In other sites you can see that bigger than 4, but, you know, for our site we'd usually, you know, see 2 or 3. We're seeing 4 or so going along, skimming the surface one behind the other. So yeah, I mean, basically it's all still happening. And we've had some really fantastic data. We've managed to ID mantas coming from other parts of Fiji to the Asawas and back again. There was a manta that was spotted 11 months, well, so it was sometime in 2019, probably I think September 2019, on the eastern side of Viti Levu, a reef called Wakaya, in the Lomai Viti group of islands. So that's east of Viti Levu. And Luke Gordon, whose house I'm currently staying in right now, the project for the Manta project in Fiji, graphed an. And lost you guys. Am I back? Am I back?
No, I can hear
Common
you now.
internet
I can
holds
hear you
on.
now. Yes. Yeah, just went. We got you. He photographed.
Okay, cool.
He photographed.
Oh, we lost you for a second.
And then that manta we spotted her in the channel.
Oh wow!
So we saw me and Matt saw this melanistic, which is one of the black mantas, about 3 meters across, sort of young adult female, and yeah, took an ID shot. We'd never seen her before, and got back on land, uploaded the photo, got in touch with Luke. Luke was like, I saw Manta 11 months ago in Wakaya, 230 kilometers away.
That's impressive.
And we saw this manta for a few days, and then off she went. And then even more impressive was another manta which came from Kandavu. And it was a 13-month break between seeing her in Kandavu and seeing her in the Asawas. This is a really cool story. She was spotted in the Asawas, with us probably about over a 2-week period in July, pretty heavily pregnant. And, we were over the moon at seeing that migration in itself. 3 weeks later, she was back in Kandavu. Bearing in mind, there is an open ocean crossing between. For those of you who don't know the geography of Fiji, Kandavu is probably one of the southernmost islands. It's almost directly south of Viti Levu, and there's something about reef and marine life around Kandavu, and
how many
mantas sites there.
How many tags have you actually got in place at the moment on mantas in the Fiji area?
So the tagging that's been conducted by Manta Trust is a sort of a kind of slowly expanding sort of project like this to build up a broader picture, inch forward to get a broader picture, the various sites around Fiji. And tagging projects are, before we go into the sort of the nitty gritty of it, because there's some amazing stuff that we've found up in the Asawas. But when you start talking about tagging projects, I think it is worth just taking a second to appreciate, the motivations behind it and the justification behind it, but also the complexities and difficulties and the limitations, because I think Hollywood gives us this idea that you can just, I don't know, put a really super high technological little piece of technology on this thing and doesn't affect them, and then you get this amazing data set, and then everyone's like, well, why aren't we tagging everything all the time? And I think the history of tagging projects, if you go back sort of 20 years, everyone was tagging everything 20 years ago, in safaris, and let's tag the elephants, let's do this, and not a lot of that converted to useful data that informed policy, which actually improved the kind of conservation status of these species. So, and then you combine that with, a lot of, if you're using sort of radio tagging and acoustic tagging, that's a lot more practical in the field, but you've always got to attach this thing to the animal. So you've got the ethical sort of, are we going to, cause maybe some distress, discomfort here for getting some information that may or may not improve their sort of their actual status. So if you are going to conduct a tagging project, you really need to approach it from a very sort of, considered standpoint. And with Luke here, who's been running this project on the ground several years now, and he's done a great job to connect a lot of the different sites around Fiji and get the sort of bigger picture countrywide. So if you look at a lot of other tagging projects with mantas around the world, which have been sort of kicking off here and there over the last 5 years, data shows that if you use certain types of attachments, within 20 minutes often, mantas are seen back at the site without much visible distress to them. We know that they're exceptional healers. We see it all the time. We get injuries in the mantas up in the Asawas, sometimes propeller scars, sometimes fishing line. I've got a story about some fishing line and a manta to tell you guys, which is very cool in a second. But these mantas, once whatever's caused the injury is not there anymore, they heal within weeks almost, if not, then within months, you often see pretty severe wounds fully healed. So the way these tags are kind of deployed, you have a little sort of almost arrowhead, very sort of, sharp, but sort of big enough that it goes, once it goes beneath the skin, it's going to stay there. And then you've got a short line of, either nylon fishing line or steel fishing line. And then at the end of that is your tag. And Luke thankfully does all the programming, and Luke does also all the deployment. And so, there have been acoustic, that's basically the essence of the tags. We have some acoustic tags which send pings, and every time they pass a receiver, it'll send information to the receiver, which you've had to install on the reef somewhere. And then every time a manta with a tag passes it, it goes, oh, this manta passed at this date at this time. Which, if you've got in one sort of fairly broad area, maybe 6 or 7 different sites that mantas utilize, you can put all these receivers there and build up quite a cool spatial movement map over the course of a season. And Luke's just downloaded a load of data from these receivers. He was recently down in Kandavu, and that was one of the things he was collecting, and he said he's got something like 110,000 data points or something like that. Wow. That he's now got to process. And so that there is obviously, I'm sure there's software that can do that, but you get this quite cool map of the manta movements, and some of the stuff they're seeing is really interesting. You see certain types of individuals utilizing certain sites, some being quite generalistic, and then you can also track that with certain climatic or weather patterns on certain dates and see, oh, well, on this day, everything, like we had 40 mantas come and spend 2 days here, or whatever. And so what's going on there? And, oh yeah, we happened to be there and we saw that it was this massive plankton abundance, whatever. And so you get these really cool sort of pictures of their movements. If you want to get more, a higher resolution sort of data set on individual manta movements, one thing you can use is satellite tags. And satellite tags are much sort of, they're more technical as a piece of equipment. And as such, there's probably more stuff that can go wrong. But what it means is you don't have to have receiver, you let the manta go where it goes, and it will send a message every time it breaks the surface. And so, there are considerations like, let's get the tether length the right length. If it's too long, maybe somebody's going to come along and think it's a fish, or they'll come and grab it, or the manta itself may turn upside down and try and knock it off, and all that sort of stuff. As I said, they don't seem to have much long-term distress from previous research done in other countries, but if it's a foreign thing there, the manta's not stupid. It knows that there's something there, and sometimes just that alone, they can rub them off. What was
How long have you been ripping up a manta?
But with the satellite tags, you don't have to have a receiver. Sorry. And so basically, yeah, with the Asawas, we've recently had these deployed. It's just a pilot study at the moment, and we have 2 mantas currently giving off absolutely mind-blowing data. So there's one massive female which has now been sort of cruising around the Asawas. She went out to the outer reef. She went up to the northern Asawas. She went out to the outer reef again. She's back almost sort of to northern part of Naviti. So she's been going all over. And, what's really interesting about manta interactions in the Asawas until almost now, all of our understanding of where they are was just that, pretty much that one location near Barefoot Manta. And then everyone goes, where do they go? in the off season, or at least low tide. Where are they at low tide if they're not in the channel here? And we're seeing stuff like, well, they're still around the Asawas, potentially they're going all over, but then you'll obviously have these other ones that are going to Kandavu or to the other side of Fiji. So I think what we're kind of, the picture we're getting, and I don't want to jump, obviously this is in the whole data collection stage, but it's looking like you get mantas which are residential to a sort of region, and they'll utilize certain sites in that region, and then you get your nomads which are just happy to sort of just jump all over. So it's fascinating to sort of see that in real time. It's also quite, if you can set these once you have an account with the company that makes the satellite tags, and you're looking at these data, these points that are kind of pinging every time that tag breaks a surface. Like if it's a good clear signal, you'll get a nice location, and you can go on this portal and online and see that as a map, and you can track it and send the route. And then every time that alert comes through, oh God, let's see, where is she now? Oh, and it can come, as I say, a little bit stressful to see that, but really, really cool stuff. And I think it's just the start and in terms of that initial motivation of why do we want to tag anyway, yes, it's great for us to see it, it's quite cool, and we can share these photos and say, oh, look at that manta's done that. But if you do find these sites, you can start to kind of push for policy change, and you can basically get maybe sites we weren't aware past protected or managed effectively, and not kind of just turned into a free for all or whatever. So it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, that's really impressive, Rob. Thanks very much. I mean, it's for me, who's been working with Fiji for a long time, but not necessarily a full diver. I've just found the progress of the Manta projects really, really exciting. Because I think when I first started working with Tourism Fiji, we used to talk about the mantas. Really, you could just go to Kandavu down in the south and see them on the Great Astrolabe Reef. But now, with the work you're doing and Manta Trust, you can track them all over Fiji, and it's great to hear how far they're traveling. It's so interesting. Angelica's just joined our group a few minutes ago, actually a little while ago, and she's asked, are they all reef mantas?
Good question. So they are almost all reef mantas. The vast majority, the ones for the tagging project, are all reef mantas. But Oceanic Mantas were, and not 100% sure if this is true, but Luke spotted Oceanic Mantas outside of Suva in November 2018, and I know that's true, but that might be the first confirmed scientific observation of oceanic Fiji. That was November 2018, and so that's a pretty cool thing. We have every reason to suspect that they have been here the entire time, and by been here I mean oceanic mantas migrating across island chains in the Pacific, which we know they can do huge distances between one set of islands and another set of islands. That's a very natural behavior for them. So why would it be in far eastern, southeastern Fiji as well, southern Lao group, LAU, Lao, not a whole lot of tourism there, not a whole lot of humans living there in general, but that seems like it would be a very likely spot for oceanic mantas to migrate through. As I said, Luke saw some in November. Amazing. Saw at that same location them this year as well, same time of year. I don't know if it's the same individuals, but he got some ID shots this time. And then now it's a bit of, I'm trying to kind of stay objective about this because it's a bit of a sore subject, oceanic mantas to me right now, because there have been 2 sightings of oceanic mantas in the Asawas this year for the first time ever. Now, often we've got IDs of them in Fiji at all, scientifically, but the other guy, Matt, saw the first one on April the 28th, which is and I was in the water, and I saw 2 other mantas about 5 minutes sort of away in the channel where the current's quite strong, and cleaning station where Matt and I were hovering, which is often where the mantas are, and we didn't have a boat with us, so we sort of would swim out and kind of, you can't really swim against the current. So if you are in the dark and then swim to the islands and walk back along the islands, it's a 15-minute sort of round trip for what's sort of if you're going 300 meters in the water. So I go and get these ID shots. Beautiful female melanistic mantas. We see them loads. They're some of our most commonly sighted ones. Really big, mature females, very chilled. One called V, one called. And once I'm getting back to Matt where he is on the cleaning station, he starts yelling Barostris at me, which is for the oceanic manta, Mogula barostris. He's yelling Barostris at me. I'm not. No, what? he's Matt's very good with mantas. It's not, if he makes a claim, he's not. He wouldn't have just said it for the sake of it. It was a confirmed ID and of it, and it had come in and it had done a circle and right in front of him, and about a meter bigger than the biggest sort of reef mantas we've got. So ocean meters, I believe. You know, a lot of the mature adult females they see in the hotspots around sort of, I guess, the Maldives and all that can grow 6 meters easily. A lot of them, and then yeah, I think our biggest reef mantas that we get are about 4 meters. Lady Grey, Jane, you remember Lady Grey? She's about 4 meters, and she's probably 5, maybe even 40 years old. We guess based on sort of past ID shots, and when we, you know, her first ID shots, I think 2008 or something like that, and she's a mature adult then. Back to the Oceanic. So I missed that on my birthday. I didn't get to see an Oceanic. So you know. Then in September, Matt saw another Oceanic, and that came on consecutive days. And I was on the mainland then doing a coral restoration training workshop. And that was amazing for me because, as well, we've talked sort of almost exclusively about mantas this morning. My true sort of passion and projects that I really do sort of you know, really love to get involved in here is coral more than anything. And I was on the mainland doing my coral restoration course, and Matt sends me a text of an I think 5.5 meter pushing sort of 6 meter Oceanic Manta.
I just have to say, can I just
say the visibility was really good.
Can I just say something here? Rob is underplaying what he actually does.
Yeah.
He's probably one of, if not the most, probably definitely one of the most prolific coral planters that the Fiji Islands definitely has seen in recent years, if not ever seen. He's underplaying what he's actually doing.
No, shut up. I think no, I'd say that's very kind of you, Elliot, but I think there's some really like Fiji's got quite a long history of coral gardening, and I definitely participated in a coral restoration and planting project that was established back in 2011 at Barefoot Manta, and it's quite a localized little project. We've got partnerships with South Sea Cruises, and we do a lot of stuff at Mala Mala and South Sea Island, and these reefs are actually really lovely. And I mean, Barefoot Manta has been going on for so long. Prior to you know anything happening at Barefoot Manta, you know there've been coral scientists in Fiji, you know, associated with WWF, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, World Conservation, lots of, you know, pretty big global organizations, and these guys have been established here in Fiji for decades, and it's a really cool and conservation from the perspective of these organizations, because I mean, Fiji has this beautiful biodiversity. It's also a developing nation, but it's the climate for all these involvements is very suitable, I feel. So if you guys, I don't know if you remember, there was a documentary a long time ago, South Pacific Cumberbatch, and Fiji's back in that, you know, that's 2009, and I think the most viewed YouTube clip on coral gardening or reef restoration on YouTube is from that documentary. And Bowden Kirby, who I've in the past, and you know, there's some really inspirational stuff, and you know, a lot of community empowerment as well. The other thing is that and this is an interesting one. There's been a big sort of coral farming for the aquarium trade. You know, there's a lot of that happened as well, which is, you know, I'm not a whole saying that's a positive thing. There's a lot of kind of controversial discussions about the aquarium trade here, and how much corals are being grown and how much are being sort of harvested from the wild and all that lot. But quite a few sites. But you know, besides the history of coral gardening and reef restoration in Fiji, of which, you know, there's been quite a substantial amount, the government has just pledged a huge initiative for what they call the Plant a Million Corals project, and that is a very sort of ambitious sort of statement. And the thing is that it's a big claim. I think you know, there are a lot of different places around Fiji that will probably get involved in that. Sort of a quantity thing, because that obviously has a very kind of sexy ring to it. 1 million corals, yeah, plant 1 million trees, plant 1 million corals, we love it. But it's not just sort of like so Explorers is a group that have been set up by a scientist called Victor Benito in restoration. He's the guy whose training I went on in September when I missed the Oceanic. And he ran a lot of training courses, and actually there's a few other marine biologists from the Asawas as well, which is fantastic. Octopus, I think, had a marine biologist there, and coconuts, I think, had a marine biologist there, as well as maybe a few more. And basically Victor's sort of ethos is one of, right, if we're going to do a restoration project, we don't just go for broad scale and sort of just go out and just go, right, let's just plant. When we do it, we start off with the site that we want to fix or restore. You go and you assess the conditions, and you make sure that you've got something to attach your corals to, you plant your corals to, you need a hard substrate. You need, ideally, the living conditions for them. So obviously a lot of fish is going to be great. Like grazers like parrotfish and surgeonfish clean away seaweeds and clean away macroalgae, which can compete with corals. They can prevent coral larvae settling. They can prevent fish larvae settling. So they also, all these fish also poo on the corals, which is great food as well. So you want these sites which are going to have a good chance of, you know, like a high success rate of the corals you plant. Then you work out the depths, then you work out what species you think are going to thrive there, and then you work backwards. Then you set up your nursery, and you set up your nursery in similar conditions to what the restoration site's going to be. And then the fragments that you put in your nursery, which it's probably too late in the year now, because I only want to do this when it's cold, because breaking off these branches is a level of stress. A coral colony is basically, if you think of it, almost like a termite mound, but with the living things on the outside and the structure actually being rock, you know, calcium carbonate. I'm sure most people have some sort of grasp of that. David Attenborough's done a great job of, you know, discussing these things. But if you kind of picture, say, a big bushy coral like this, if I were to come and snap off that branch there, that's going to have loads of little coral animals on the outside. So they can then, once I put them in a nice set of living conditions, can grow. That's going to be my nursery. But now that's been physical damage, you know, so there's going to be like physical trauma to some of that. And then also, if you picture that little finger there, it was kind of surrounded by all these other branches. So the sun day that goes over, and the whole time that branch has existed as part of that coral, gets this cycle of sunlight coming like that, and corals get very used to those conditions. You break it off, and suddenly it's getting sunlight from all around it. And you see for the first 2 weeks that these actually bleach. And I can talk about bleaching, but it is a very, very complicated topic that most people either overcomplicate a little bit or oversimplify. But in short, it's a stress response, and much sunlight for a branch like that isn't used to it, it'll bleach. And then within 2 weeks, the polyps that were used to getting the sunlight have sort of spread their algae around, and the other corals of the other polyps that are now getting more sunlight than they were used to before are kind of like, oh, right, I'm getting sunlight now. Cool. All right. Well, I'll just get this algae and I'll get these sorts of this microbiome environment, and then they're fine. And then you give your nursery a year or 2 years, depending if it's a deeper nursery and the corals are growing a little bit slower, which would be more suitable if you're restoring a deeper site. A year for a shallower site should be enough for your corals to have grown from that fragment. That fragment will then heal over, and then you'll start to get secondary branching. Well, first of all, it'll probably glue itself to whatever sort of attachment you have, if it's a rope or if it's a table or whatever. And then when that coral, you know, is attached to itself, secondary branching will often happen. You know, often these corals will sort of double in size. And they start to kind of program themselves to start growing into that almost adult colony shape. And even, you know, maybe starting to get to the stage of spawning maturity, depending again on the species. Once you've planted those corals, you know, once they're ready to plant, in that restoration site, you really want to have it planted in a layout where it can be effective to spawn. That's your goal here. You want to create functional ecosystem. Obviously, you want to create fish habitat, but the ultimate goal is to create something that's going to successfully spawn and continue to seed reefs in the surrounding region. So the best way to do that is to have multiple sort of I mean, the word is genotypes, the technical term, but if you think about it like bloodlines, you know, or family lines, genetic lines. So for one species of coral, you know, if that's the only colony, the parent colony, if that's the only sort of source for your coral fragments, when you ultimately plant and they release their gametes, they're not going to be able to fertilize the sperm and the eggs. So that's not very, you know, it's great if you've got something for the fish to live in, but it's not sort of as good as it could be if you say took 5 different parent corals for one species and you took maybe 4 or 5 branches of each. You know, first of all, you've got this genetic diversity, but then also the actual impact you put on that parent colony is less because you've only taken 5 instead of say 25 fragments. If you know, so it's more efficient like that as well. And then, you know, once you've got those corals growing, then the next task is how do you get them attached to the site that you're looking to restore, and you've got a few different techniques you can use for that. Again, there is no one plan fits all, but you know, you can either wedge plant it, which is something actually we've been doing lots of Barefoot Manta, but maybe if your site's a little bit more choppy, you would want something maybe like a marine epoxy, or there are certain cement mixes that you can make, which you can use underwater, and you can sort of cement your corals to the reef. And then you leave it another year, and those corals will probably have, again, added another maybe 10 centimeters or 5 to 10 centimeters on each of the branches. So something, a fragment that size after a year could be that size, and then after another would probably be that size. And by that age, most of them definitely would be at spawning maturity. So you would also then hope to get multiple species. So as I said, for one species, you get multiple genotypes, but for your whole sort of spread, you want different species and you want different shapes and different life forms. So as you know, let's have a load of staghorns, let's have a load of table corals, if the site suits it. What we call like cespitors or little bushy ones. You know, there's corals growing all shapes and sizes, right? And actually the most sort of species rich and, you know, productive coral reef environments have complex, you know, structures from different types of corals. So you know, and if you're restoring this site, you're in control of how that gets distributed. And so you're setting up your nursery, you just sort of, you know, have that in mind from the start. And so when you use these sorts of approaches, you can, and Victor's shown it multiple times across the Coral Coast because he's been doing this for a while. You have these sites, think of something maybe 20, 30 meters in radius, having 500 corals that you've grown in one nursery. And what's very exciting about the coral restoration effort is you've got this sort of government intention to do a really sort of broad scale, plant 1 million corals. But then you've also got these pockets of, you know, very informed sort of conservation operators, and they've got data, they've got, you know, years of scientific experiment making process, and now that's sort of getting involved in seeping through into the tourism sort of industry. And so us at Barefoot Manta, you know, now like a lot of these sort of, let's just get a load of coral out there, which is definitely important, especially when you're starting out. And that's but we're getting now a much more sort of focused approach at a lot of these sites. And it's a very sort of exciting sort of for the country.
Definitely. I definitely agree with that.
That's been my real kind of passion this year more than anything.
Yeah, well done, Rob. I think it is really heartening to see how many partners in Fiji are really getting on board, not just with the corals, but also planting mangroves. And I think the real initiative started up was going on actually before Fiji took the presidency of the United Nations Climate Forum. You know, COP26 in particular was a great moment for Fiji in really showing the world how much we really care about the environment. And, you know, we're one of the first countries to have certain kinds of initiatives for ensuring sharks were safe. And we've got such good sites. But the other thing about the Asawis is, people always know about Savu in the north of Fiji being the coral capital of the world and the Sunshine Coast, and down in Kandavu. But beforehand, really these Sawas weren't taken seriously as a top spot for diving. And I think it's great to see the work that you're doing, because I think also, in addition to what you're doing with the mantas, your partner resort, Barefoot Quarters, also had some exciting work going on with sharks as well.
You could say that.
I got bits of that, and I think the essence of it sort of was leading me on to talk about Barefoot Quarter, which is a really, really cool site. I think everyone who's visited the island of Quarter feels something very, very special there. And the shark program that they've got is, it's the sort of it's the flag bearer of shark conservation of Yasawas. Hands down. The real hero of shark conservation in the Asawis is Thomas Vigneault. And I know Elliot was very kind to talk about the work that I've done in the Asawis, but if we're on this sort of line of conversation, I think Thomas Vigneault, who I unfortunately didn't get the pleasure of meeting, he was left sort of just as I was starting. But this is a French guy with a PhD in I think black tip genetics, and he's currently left. I think he's in Mauritius and doing shark policy in Mauritius, and he set up this act. But this operation, sort of the diving tourism side of things, but also this amazing chance to get a snapshot, an understanding of the population dynamics of bull sharks, which, I've seen bull sharks at Quarter about 5 or 6 times since I've been in Fiji, which is way too few, given how close I am to it. But I do get very involved in my corals, and but the shark operation there, basically they do feed them. They feed them. It's something that I think a lot of people do kind of get immediately up in arms about. And when you dive and just hope to see a bull shark, you don't see it. So if you feed it, that gives you the chance of it coming to you. Now that's a very sort of careful line you've got to tread if you're going to be bringing a voracious predator to you, and you're going to be conditioning it in a certain way. That is very much a Pandora's box. So Thomas Vigneault, the way he set this up, and there are a few other places in Fiji that do a very similar job, you need to be coming from a point that it's not about profits, it's about the sharks first and foremost. And from what I've heard, you won't meet a person more passionate about sharks and their well-being. What you need to do is also be understanding of that conditioning. As I've said, if you're going to be giving them food from hand, if you're going to be doing it different times of the day, suddenly, and if it's different individuals, all these factors will play into it. And once that becomes a sort of a thing that the sharks go, well, there could be food, you really are looking at something that's going to be risky. And bull sharks have a big old mouth on them with a very powerful bite. So basically, Thomas established this set of procedures where the bull sharks are fed fish heads, which obviously are very smelly. They have all the chemical cues of the food of the bull sharks. The bull sharks come in, go, what's that? Yum, yum, yum. Okay, cool, I'll eat it. And then actually, there isn't that much food on it. There's not that much sustenance. And so they still have to go out and predate. They will be getting some things. Very interestingly as well, they started to notice a few years on, most of the sharks that do come and probably don't actually eat. They're just coming there for the smell and then to see what's going on. And they're not high enough in the sort of the dominance hierarchy to actually get forward and get the food. But going back to that safety thing and the conditioning, the fish heads are delivered to the sharks by means of a pole. So you give them a sort of a spear through the fish heads, and we have these Fijian local guys who are trained up, and they're really, really phenomenal at it. They release these fish heads into the water column, and the bull sharks will come along and they'll eat them. And that isn't natural. Let's not dance around the subject, but it conduct it in a way that is extremely regular. You're doing it at the same time every day. You're doing it with the same people. You ensure that there's never any touching, and you are militant about these rules and these procedures, which is how Thomas set it up from the start, and how the guys at Quata run it. Then what you have is suddenly the sharks become the rhythm of it becomes very sort of readable, and they understand their role in it, and they understand your role in it. And then all you need to do is put a wall a nice sort of 5 meters away, or 3 meters away, and you put the guest behind it, or whoever comes to observe it, and you have this chance. And you can see 1 or 2 bull sharks, you can see 10, you can see 15, depending on the year, the time of the year. And then you have the chance, as as a marine biologist, to go, okay, who's that? Can we start to ID these based on their characteristics and their markings and their size and all this sort of stuff? And then you, over time, and much like the Manta project, we get our ID shots with the photos of their underside. But with the bull sharks, it's stuff like, notches on the fins. It's if they've got fishing line injuries or hooks or something like that, the size and the shape of the head and things like that. Sometimes coloration. And you can go back to your database and you can see, oh, we saw this one this time last year, or we haven't seen this one for 3 years or 4 years or anything like that. And then you can collaborate with other sites across Fiji, and you can match their clear photos, and that's pretty easy if the sharks are coming in and they're right there in front of you. Then you can collaborate with these other, see if we're getting migrations across Fiji, and there is collaboration between these sites. So obviously probably the most famous area for shark diving in Fiji is Benga Lagoon, and there are some operators there which are doing a fantastic job. There are some Mickey Mouse operators there as well, so do your research. I won't say anything more controversial than that, but there are some very, very respectable operators in Benga Lagoon, and honestly some of the premier sort of shark diving operators in the world, I think, came out of Benga Lagoon, and then the way that it's run in the Asawas is pretty much of a very similar vein to how those solid, good job operators in Benga. Go on.
Yeah, I was going to say the other interesting thing that they've found is how much it's regenerated the reef in that area. Because the area near Suva is better known for being a port, and so not necessarily an area you would think of being great to visit for reefs, although there are some fantastic reefs around there. So I think it's encouraging to see that although shark encounters and shark feeding in this way, it can be controversial. If it is, as you say, managed really, really well, then it's beneficial to the whole ecosystem in the area, and they've won awards for it. And I think the other thing is that Fijians are quite spiritual, and one of the known gods in Fijian legend is a shark god. So particularly in the Benga area, there's an area that really reveres sharks, and they're not as afraid of sharks as
Dakuwanga,
people.
That's the name of the shark drug there.
Yes.
Dakuwanga.
So they're not. They don't have the fear, and I was astonished in Benga Lagoon that so many of these sharks had names. Much like your mantas have names, and some of the guys in the villages that have been diving with them have been going down since they were teenagers, and they're now older men. And they've become so familiar with them. But Fiji's a great place to see such a good variety of sharks in one dive.
I mean, I think there are some cool places globally to check out, really cool shark life, but I think Fiji really is up there. Just the variety you have, even on our island, you got ships that just come into the bay. You've got obviously Quata, and then we haven't even spoken about Taveuni and all those places. I mean, those are very much your specialist dive spots, but you know, what's great about the Asawas is the people, if you are a dive enthusiast, you've got plenty of options in the Asawas. You've got obviously your big stuff like um, sharks, snorkeling with mantas, unfortunately, if you do like diving with them. But you've got amazing corals as well if you come to us. And then there's some really cool sites where you can see some cryptic stuff for those people who like cryptic stuff. And so you've got these amazing places, the options like Tabiuni, like Kandavu. But now with the Asawas, there is some really cool stuff for your dive enthusiasts. And all the people that, you know, think have come to the Asawas, those guys who are doing their island hopping trips and all that lot, you know, diving is on our reef, and I think a lot of the other sites as well, but you know, we've got the best coral, so shh, shh, shh. But just the intro dive setup for the
Yeah.
guys who have like, you know, doing discover scuba diving and all that sort of stuff, or learn, you know, a lot of these reefs in the Asawas, they're just perfect locations for that. I know you can get really cheap sort of certified open water courses in parts of Southeast Asia, Thailand, and definitely the Caribbean as well. So a lot of people are going to be going to those places, but they're hubs, you know, and that's great if you kind of you love that busy environment, and there's a lot of really cool communities there. But if you want to learn in a little bit more of a sort of let's go and have a bit of a Fiji time vibe, and by that I mean just a little bit more kind of one-to-one, you know, you have yourself and a few other students, 1 to sort of 3 or 1 to 4 with your instructor, and get a really nice chill dive up in the Asawas. That for me is as good as any avenue into diving as I think you can get. So now just I think one thing I'd like to add about the Asawas, and it's true with us at Barefoot Manta and Barefoot Quata, and I think a lot of the other, is as soon as the ferries open, I think a lot of these resorts we're kind of treading water and have kind of got right now a lot of resorts are fairly closed down, skeleton staff on a lot of the islands, and as soon as the prospect of opening up again, within weeks, you know, if we need weeks notice or if we get weeks notice, we'll be able to open those islands up and those resorts up, you know, in next to no time at all. It's pretty much standard procedure to close down these resorts and open them up quick time for cyclone, you know, situations which we get on almost every year anyway. So what's going to be great about, you know, opening up the borders and having tourism, be it from initially Australia, New Zealand, and then hopefully later other parts of the world, is once those sort of that influx is there, the Asawas will be ready to receive it, and then you get these sort of these Fijians that you mentioned who have this reputation of hospitality and the joy and the love, and for them, you know, a lot of these guys are back in the villages and they're living, you know, back in the communities, and there's more farming, there's more fishing. It's a different life, you know, a lot of positives, a lot of negatives. But once they get that tourism back, I guarantee, you know, they'll all be there on the beaches singing the Brilla songs, and it will be a very, very special time, I'm sure. Yeah, it'll be very, very cool.
Oh, it will. I can't wait for that moment. I'm missing it so much, and just the interaction with our Fijian colleagues. But you know, if anyone wants to see more videos and get more of a flavour of Fiji while we're all in that dreaming stage, if you go onto YouTube and Fiji Tourism, you'll see all our videos, and there's one called Our Bulla Spirit Awaits You, which is a great overview of Fiji in a nutshell. But also on YouTube and on our Tourism Fiji booth during Scuba.Digital, you can have a look at all our videos, including the wonderful manta rays. Actually, we've had another question, Rob, and it's are there lots of different cleaning stations for mantas in Fiji?
Sorry, say that one last time.
Are there lots of cleaner stations for mantas in Fiji? Cleaning stations.
He's
Oh
frozen.
God, it's just one last time. Sorry.
Cleaning
Say that one more
stations.
time.
Cleaning stations.
He doesn't know what that word means.
Cleaning
Do you know the
stations.
answer?
Cleaning stations.
Yes, 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 yes.
Manta and cleaning stations. Okay, manta and cleaning stations. So there's loads of cleaning stations around Fiji for mantas, and sort of mound of coral. It's about as deep and 20 meters, maybe 5, 10 meters wide, and it has loam in it, and the mantas often will come and these clean off dead skin or healing wounds, parasites. And the mantas obviously appreciate it, but you know, and you see it all over the world. Often cleaning stations tend to be focal sites for socializing and, you know, and so that's sort of the structure of our site. In Kandavu, they have almost a tiered cleaning station at one of their sites. So they've got a sort of a shallow, very shallow, medium, and a little bit deeper. And they often get multiple mantas coming in at various times and hovering around those. And what's cool as well is that probably at those different tiers, you get different species, which may focus on different areas of the anatomy of the manta, or at least different things to clean off. And so, you know, you get these sort of very cool little interactions. And then there are some other cleaning stations. The site I mentioned called Wukaya in the Lomai Viti group, there I think is sort of almost a vertical drop to 1,000 meters on this pinnacle reef out in almost in the blue, and mantas come and feed right on the surface there. And Luke's got some amazing drone shots of mantas just hovering on the surface there. So yeah, cleaning stations are awesome. I just remembered I mentioned earlier on in the year there was an incident with a manta and a fishing line, which my Matt saw Maddie for the first time hovering over this cleaning station in the channel, wrapped 10 times in fishing line, and she had some pretty severe injuries, and half her face was closed, clamped shut. And we went back to the island, we grabbed some dive knives and came back out, and I was able to sort of see her, and we had drone support, and so the drone found her, and I swam out and swam down to about 7-8 meters and cut one of the lines. It was a nylon fishing line, and it freaked her out just to me touching it. Obviously it was very off, and returned the next day, thankfully, and it had detached a little bit, and everywhere the line had kind of sort of cut her, and almost, if you picture her wings, you know, almost half a foot, if not more, up into her wings, you know, with this sort of laceration, and all along her back was really nasty mucus. Which thankfully, after I cut that first line, started to sort of wash away. And then Matt and I, when we went out the next day, we saw her, Maddie, the hunter, and she was visibly more relaxed, and it had loosened a little bit. And she was basically cruising very slowly, and I basically ducked down, and she kind of paused just like this, and I went underneath her, and Matt came down from the top. As soon as she stopped, and it was very sort of moving experience to sort of have that initial kind of pause, because it was like, yesterday she panicked and she swam away as soon as I touched the line. I did manage to cut one. Today she's very, and furthermore, a manta that stays stationary is doing it deliberately, because then they'll start to sink. They're actually negatively buoyant, and they stay moving by forward momentum and propulsion. And that's very important for them to continue almost, you know, withdrawing oxygen from the water around them. They need that forward momentum to drive the water across their gills. So when they stay stationary like that, it's effectively like them holding their breath. which they can obviously do for a short while. But we start sinking, and so it was probably about 3 or 4 meters. So we start sinking, and Matt and I managed to take off, I'd say, about 95% of the fishing line. She still had a little bit left on the top of her left side of her head, and suddenly she starts barrel rolling and barrel rolling and barrel. So it's somersault feeding, not barrel rolling, somersault feeding. She starts somersault feeding these backward loops. And you really, when you're analyzing manta behavior or any sort of wildlife behavior, it is very important not to anthropomorphize and jump to conclusions about what's going on in their head. But it really did look like this was a happy manta, a very relieved manta. We remained with her for about another hour or so, and then by that point we'd been out there for about 2 hours, and I got pretty cold, and I ended up, and she went away for a little bit, and I ended up going back ashore. Matt stayed out there, and she ended up coming back again, sort of half an hour after I'd gone ashore, and Matt managed to swim down for a second time, and this time just above, and she stopped again for him. And this time he was able to remove that final. It was very intricately sort of wrapped around there, and it was still attached to the fishing line, the fishing hook. And he managed to get it off, and so the only thing left was the fishing hook. And so from that first one, the two of us, and that second one with just him, we were able to affect everything that had entangled her face and that was cutting her, and all that was left with this metal hook, which, when we saw her 3 days later, had rusted out and fallen out. Wow. We then saw her 2 months later, and the wounds had healed about 90%, and I saw her about a month ago, full scar, but for the right-hand side, and it was 95% healed on the left-hand side, and all the marks on her face had healed. Maddie was pregnant last year, and she gave birth towards the end of last year as well, so we know she's a mum. Not that mantas necessarily care for their young. We don't necessarily suppose, but that right there was truly one of the most magical experiences of my life. But really, really inspiring to see the healing abilities of mantas, and just to see that sort of, the recognition from mine and Matt and behavior, the way that we were kind of letting her have the space, and then able to sort of help her a little bit, that she was then willing to give us that trust, and just for a species to sort of be able to kind of exhibit that behavior and that level of cognition, it's a marvel. You take a step back and go, these animals are super inspirational. And so Maddie, I'm sure we'll be back again next year. She's one of our residents. I think we've seen her every single year since 2011, and it's a really, really cool story. So that was a real highlight of the year.
Highlight of your life. Oh, amazing.
Speaking of really, really cool stories.
Very much so. Yeah, no, it'd be cool.
I learned something fascinating myself about 3 or 4 years ago from Rob, which I wonder if Rob could perhaps share. It's to do with the coral reefs in Fiji, some pretty exciting, groundbreaking, dare I say, news/research which is coming out at the moment. So I wonder if you could perhaps share that, Rob, because I think that's fascinating, and I didn't know that myself until about 4 hours ago.
Oh, right. So this is stuff that's Victor's spearheading, the guy who's sort of done the training for a lot of the resort marine biologists in reef restoration. He's got a few different fingers in a few different pies, and one of them is taxonomy, and he's been going through a lot of the species that have been identified in Fiji, and he obviously spends a lot.
Oh, it's a cliffhanger.
Hopefully get Rob back in a sec. Oh, no, you're back. We can hear you now.
So, research on coral. He has the morphological features, both of the corallites of the coral and the overall growth forms that they take, and comparing that to what they have been classified historically. Because there was a lot of taxonomy done in Fiji in the 19th century, towards the end of the 19th century. And I think the general consensus for a long time is we have in the region of about 350 to 400 coral species, which is a pretty fair number as it is. But Victor's work, looking, as I said, at the morphological features, but also I forgot to mention the genetic features. He's getting pretty significant indicators that there are more than previously thought, including huge numbers of acroporas, which are your sort of unicorn species, your table coral species, a lot of the digitate finger coral ones. There's quite a lot of different types of acroporas all over the world. I think there's about 250 to 300 species of acroporas alone. There's one genus of coral. As for our genus, there is only one living species. For acroporas, the genus, there's so in Fiji, currently it is coming to light that there are potentially another 50 undescribed species. And there's one that they're about to publish, I think, a type of acropora staghorn. And I know we've got loads of them. We've got, I'd say, at least 50 colonies, within sort of 5 to maybe 10, 20 minutes each.
Wow. That is amazing. That is really, really cool.
Well, that's a great note to finish on. Wow.
Fantastic news.
And,
yeah.
I think you've worn out your connection.
Yeah. Well, I guess we should think about wrapping up now, because when are you heading back to the islands, Rob?
So as Elliot says, very cool stuff. I think just to be able to say we've got 450.
Yes.
Is pretty cool. I know on our reef, I've been counting a lot of the species, and I'm on currently 56, and I know that there's at least 20 more than that I'm still processing through, and I'm getting Victor to help me with that. And that's a reef that's I'm surveying an area which is sort of several kilometers or maybe a kilometer worth of reef crest almost, that I'm finding most of these species. So that is a very localized spot, and were I to go maybe 10, 20 kilometers away, there's going to be another 30 species if we can find a healthy reef in our vicinity that would have another load of coral species that we don't even get on our island. But I mean, you guys have both been up on our reef within the last sort of 2 or 3 years, and you'll know exactly how varied the colors and the shapes and the structures are, just from 10 minutes off our beach. So actually, Elliot, you didn't get a chance to go.
Not on the last visit, mate. I'm still trying to figure out at the moment how this pandemic has taken me from the seas of Fiji to the North Sea off the UK. I mean, it's quite a difference.
Tiny bit colder.
Yeah.
Quite a bit different. Yeah, no, I do miss Fiji a lot, actually. At the moment. I'll get there again, hopefully soon with you guys.
Yes. Oh, well, Rob, so when are you heading back to the Asawas?
Back to the island. I'm going out to, first of all, to South Sea Island and Mala Mala on Monday, tomorrow. Do Crown of Thorns stuff there. So again, I'll do a quick Crown of Thorns little run through for anyone who might be interested in that. So very sort of famous, I think, in the dive community now and in sort of marine biology world. This type of starfish that eats the living tissue of corals and really can just boom in these huge populations that kind of can have this potential to just lay waste to an area of coral. And I think there are a lot of factors which go into it. A lot of research at the moment is showing that probably the most significant factor into a crown of thorns outbreak is nutrient loading runoff. I guess farmland from just if you get a lot of rain and flooding and they just wash nutrients or fertilizers out into the ocean, you get phytoplankton blooms, and you get this algae, which is what the crown of thorns larvae are eating. And if you have lots of food for them, then they're going to have a very successful recruitment year. And then once they've settled a few years down the line, you get the adult starfish emerging on the reefs, and then they'll be eating the corals from there. And so throughout Fiji, we've had, over the last few decades, these sort of waves of crown of thorns. And I think there was a really, really bad one about 20 years ago. And a lot of the reefs in the Mamanuthas experienced some pretty bad crown of thorns outbreaks then, Mala Mala especially. And I think South Sea Island, I heard reports of teams of 10 people going out, each removing 100 crown of thorns over hours and barely making a dent. And what the reefs, I mean, corals recover extremely quickly. I think, in worldwide, corals do get a lot of press for how threatened they are, and I do think that awareness is extremely important. But a lot of this sort of raising of awareness can get a bit exaggerated, and people tend to forget that corals can, if you have successful spawning, which remember was what the restoration strategy is, you can get very, very high recruitments in a lot of reefs, and Fiji has this potential to have of coral larvae across many species settle on a hard substrate like the Mamanutha Islands. And so all over South Sea Island, Elliot, you'll remember this because you were there last time you were here, you get these little coral colonies about this size, and they're all dotted around, and within 2 years, crown of thorns don't come back. These can turn into a very, very healthy dominated habitat. As I said, that horrible crown of thorns outbreak in the Mamanuthas would have been about 20 years ago, or in that sort of region. And now Elliot and the boys at South Sea for a while were going out there doing a great job. We had a Fijian marine biologist called Apete who was there, and just when they're doing the snorkel tours and everything, and then all the boys would bring the crown of thorns and put them on a rock to dry out in the sun, which for those of you who have sort of pangs of heartfelt, oh, poor crown of thorns, do remember that each crown of thorns will eat that much coral a day. And for someone like myself, who coral is such a wonderful, magical, does that sort of damage to corals, that also doesn't have much processing or calculating in its nervous system, sort of just a cold-hearted, coral-consuming, robotic monster. Forgive me for not feeling bad for drying them out.
Well, Rob, on that,
but basically,
sorry,
I'll be going out there, and then back to your question. Then I'll be going.
Oh yeah. No, I was just
I'll be.
Sorry, Rob, we're crossing over. I apologise. Deborah Dixon-Smith, who's just very kindly joined the session, says that she took part in a crown of thorns eradication dive at Barefoot Manta a few years ago, and she just wanted to know what kind of methods you're using now.
So I go very low tech. I go Fiji style, which is swim around with a canoe, and I have a metal stick, a rebar stick, which is about yay long with a kind of bend on the end, and that was made for me. I've used the same stick. We had like 5 of them made at one point, and they've lasted us like 2 or 3 years. And then you just go around and be very careful not to touch them. If you get stung by a crown of thorns, it's an extremely unpleasant experience.
I got stung by one.
If anybody does go through it, I've had it happen once. Yeah, hot water is the key, not boiling water that's going to scald you, obviously, but something that's hot enough for you to tolerate pain-wise, and that will break down the sort of the chemicals in the venom, and that really effectively stops it. And then after that, you just want to make sure you don't get an infection from the wound. So not touching them is key. I think also as in the past, especially if you have a mass outbreak and there's lots of them together, big fat plump crown of thorns tend to be they're hermaphrodites, mature crown of thorns about yay size, and then if it's spawning season, then if you end up stabbing them or being a bit rough with them, they can release these eggs. And I know a lot of starfish, if you damage them a little bit and leave them on the reef, they will regenerate arms and grow again. But crown of thorns aren't actually very good at doing that. What they're very good at doing is producing millions and millions of larvae. So some of the cooler techniques of disposing of crown of thorns are injecting them with vinegar and concoctions from almost a Ghostbuster style gun. You've got your hold all and your needle, and you inject them with stuff. And that is it's a little bit more of a high-tech way of doing it. And we do have those vinegar guns, but I feel that those are more useful when you've got a very, very high density of crown of thorns. And personally, for me, a metal stick and a canoe, I can get. I got 30 in 2 hours when I was at South Sea Island about a month and a half ago, and that was the first time anyone had been on the reef in, I'd say, since lockdown, since March, going around the whole thing. And so that is quite a lot, but it's also not that much. These are sort of relative things. I assume there'll be a sort of a similar number when I go back now. But if you compare those numbers to 20 years ago, it's vastly sort of better. It's in a much better state.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Rob. Well, we just wish we were on your canoe tomorrow going up to the Asawa Islands.
Say again.
We wish we were on your canoe going to the Asawa Islands tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. It's definitely a lovely place. And I think this summer I'm looking forward to, because Mantas is obviously with the winter months, but you do a lot of coral stuff then. But I get cold. I know I'm spoiled. This is the problem when you're in the water every day on these islands, is that 26 degrees becomes a bit cold. And then when it gets to the summer months and it gets to 29 degrees, suddenly I am very, very happy with life. So yeah, that's just around the corner. And
you do realize,
very much keen to get back out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that was really, really.
Just make sure you guys get back out here as soon as you have the chance.
We will, definitely. But Rob, thanks ever so much. It's really good that you were able to join us from, where are you today, Suva?
Yeah, I'm in Suva. I'm actually driving back across. I'm going to have, I don't even know what the final result of the rugby was, but I woke up early to watch that final, and then
we'll find out soon.
I'll be grabbing a couple of hours more sleep in a second, then I'll be driving back to Nanny's side later today, and then back out to the island soon. But yeah, absolute pleasure to come and have a chat. Very nice to catch up with you both. And yeah, obviously any chance I have to yark on and rant on about marine stuff, I'll grab the opportunity.
Thanks so much.
Take the captive audience.
Oh, thanks, Rob. And, thanks also to Elliot for supporting us, and for everyone else that's been able to join us today. Thanks for bearing with us on the signal. And we couldn't be prouder to showcase, one of the greatest projects we've got going on in Fiji right now. So good luck with those mantas, Rob, and looking forward to seeing Lady Grey again soon.
Do you want to know the result, Rob, or shall we not?
Depends where the Wasps won.
Yeah.
We've just heard on the chat.
I do.
Angelica says Exeter won the premiership.
Sorry, Rob.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah, fair play.
Wasps play.
That's epic, though. They won. That means they won the double. So go Exeter.
Yeah, fantastic. Actually, one of my school friends' sons was playing today, so it was a very special match. Anyway, thank you everybody in Fiji.
Awesome.
If
well, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks again, Rob. And in Fiji, if we were leaving an island, we would be singing a song called Isolé, which always leaves you with a smile on your face and a tear in your eye. But I'm not going to attempt to sing it now. You come to Fiji and experience that yourself. But
I won't either. Yeah. I won't either. Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys. And in Vinaka Vakalevo, as we say in Fiji, Mode Manda.
Tosoviti.
Tosoviti.
Vinaka.
Vinaka. Bye. Mode Manda.